Great morning it is, and great to see so many friends, and great to be at least a small part of something so good, that Pastor Stevenson's been doing for so many years, and so many others have helped him. And I guess for me it's important to find and look for good news. Turn on the television, listen to anything, maybe not the ones that are here, but anyway, you turn on the television, it's nothing but bad news. And there are good news stories. Pastor Stevenson's store in this school are good news. And I can just sit here and imagine kids that he taught maybe 20 years ago, where they are, and the successes, and the kids that he saved, and allowed to find Jesus and also to find their way in life. I've traveled the country talking about education, the chance to get ahead, the great equalizer, that you want to get from tough circumstances, you want to succeed in life. It is about education. How do we get and gain equality in our country? It's through education. It's interesting when you look at the poverty gap between those who score lower based on socioeconomic status. If you watch them in September and test them, and then test these kids again in May, the poverty gap narrows every year during the school year, but then widens in the summertime. The schools are helping, but the thing is after school, before school, mentorship, all of these things are needed in addition to the school if we really want to eliminate it. I think the biggest crime is people who just say, let's do it the same way we've always done it. Let's don't do anything dramatic to Jefferson County high schools because we're doing just fine. They're not paying any attention at all. The statistics have been abysmal for Jefferson County education. We've got to do better, and we can do better. But you know what they're doing is, they're looking at your kids and saying, your kids can't do it. They're saying, your kids can't do it. We're just going to slough them off and let them pass them through in the schools, and then we don't care what happens afterwards. But I can tell you, I have visited schools around the country that take kids from tough circumstances, sometimes from broken homes, sometimes from violent neighborhoods, and the success is amazing. I've been to Boys Latin School in Philadelphia, from a tough area in Philadelphia. They have 100 boys each year in high school. They teach them Latin every year, which, I thought was going away, but it's a great discipline. They teach them Latin every year. I went there for commencement a few years ago, and I can tell you, there's just something you can tell about a person. Every one of these young men walk up, look you in the eye, shake your hand, and you can tell they're going to succeed. It's like 99 out of 100 of them go to college. So the success rates are enormous. Then you might look at a regular high school where they're just doing the same old, and like 9 out of 100 are going to college. The success is amazing, but we're giving up on so many kids by just saying we're just going to do the same old thing. And it really is, we don't care about your kids if you're not willing to change. If you're against charter schools and against school choice, you don't care about these kids. And the thing is we are losing a generation after generation of kids. Right now, I was talking to somebody this morning, they showed me the statistics this morning. We have more deaths in Louisville per capita than Chicago. You keep electing the same people and sending the same people, it's not going to change. We've got to have something new. But the thing is there is a strong faith component down here. There's a strong faith component in this church and in this community. Let's not ignore it. Let's not send people to represent you who have no faith, who don't believe in family. And let's don't send people to represent us that believe that the baby, that's growing inside the mom is not a real life. I visited a school in Chicago by the name of Josephina, and this was a girls' school. So Boys Latin School in Philadelphia was a boys' school, and in Chicago was Josephina. Once again, you'll meet a mom driving her kid 45 minutes, an hour away to get to the school. Well, guess what? She's giving her kid a chance in life. and the kids are going to college. And it's just amazing. It's like, well, how come oh my goodness, these kids can't learn. 10% of them go to college. You put them in a great school and 99% are going. It's not the lack of ability to learn, it's crappy schools. It's not caring about the kids enough to give them a good education. Why should we not have the same schools on the east side of Louisville that we've got on the west side of Louisville? But it has to be about the kids. It isn't about the bureaucracy or this, that. It has to be about the kids. The kids have to be first. But for some reason, it seems like other people get involved. Some of the people involved in the educational establishment, but seem to be more concerned about themselves than they do about the kids. So something has to change. Something has to give. I visited the south side of Chicago a few years ago, and I met a pastor, Corey Brooks. You may have seen him. He's on Fox News sometime. Big guy, played football for Ball State, but who is mentoring young men in his community. And when I was there, the last fast food restaurant had left because of violence. I called up the head of McDonald's and I said, I want to do one small thing for this community. I want you to reopen the McDonald's there. And they barely would talk to me, and they didn't do it. They refused to do it. He was on television. This was like 5 years ago. He was on television last week, and it said the last Walgreens and CVS burned. That the people who live in his community, which is a very poor community, are driving 15 miles to get their prescription drugs. Something's got to give. Now, I've talked with a group of people in Louisville, black, white, you name it, police, non-police, about things that you can do. And I don't have all the answers, but I am excited about this idea, and this has been talked about in other communities, that the violence isn't coming from thousands of people, it's coming from dozens of people. Maybe a few hundred people. You've got to arrest the really bad people and put them away. But the other thing is they talk about bringing in people there's a really bad person that commits a murder and the gang members, but bringing them in and giving them a possibility of a diversion, talking to them, giving them a chance. I've been a big believer in second chances. Anybody here have never committed a sin? Please raise your hand now. We all have, and we've all done things we shouldn't have done. We all growing up, at least I made a few mistakes growing up, but there needs to be second chances. So there has been a great deal of success we've had with criminal justice reform, giving people a second chance. I do believe that there's been a disproportionate amount of young African American men put in prison over drugs. Now there's some debate over the cause of this. Some people say it's institutional racism. I tend to think it's more complicated, because I meet good black policemen on the force who aren't arresting people because they're black. But there is a problem. And I think part of it is changing our drug laws such that we don't condone this, but we try to give people a second chance. When they come before the court, give them a diversion. If they haven't hurt anybody, but they've been using drugs, give them a chance to go a different direction. Get them into a work program. Get them into some kind of mentorship program. There are ways that we can do a better job with this. Kelly and I were big proponents of the First Step Act. We went and talked to President Trump about it. I talked to President Obama about it. We finally got it passed. And I was actually here in Louisville at the Urban League one day, and I was trying to encourage some other Republicans to actually put the bill on the floor, and I was talking on TV. And about a month later, after it passed, Kelly and I were at a meeting in northern Kentucky, and we met a guy named Matthew Charles. He was the first person released after the First Step Act. He'd been in jail like 30 years. He'd become a minister. He'd found Christ. He was leading a prayer group. Gotten his education, maybe gotten a college degree, and he committed a nonviolent crime, but had been in there for 30 years. He got out, and I think he's going to be a good man and a good part of our society. But it was the fair thing to do. I think he was in there way too long. There's still some disparities in the way we treat drug crimes between crack and powder cocaine. And it just historically was white kids were using powder cocaine, black kids were using more crack. I don't think it is as much anymore, but there's still people in jail that have been there for 10, 20 years for using drugs that we need to get out of jail. So I've been for making more equity in that. I've been for looking backwards and trying to make it better. We had a very emotional and big thing over, what happened with Breonna Taylor. But 10 years before that, I was opposed to no-knock raids. And I've talked to the police. I have people who are former policemen that work for me, and I've said, look, As much as I care also about Breonna Taylor and her family, I also care about the police. It's very dangerous for them to go in the middle of the night. They sometimes make mistakes. They go in the wrong house. But I don't think there's really a reason for us to go in the middle of the night. I talked to the sheriffs out in the countryside. They say they don't even use no-knock raids. The only people using no-knock raids were Louisville and Lexington. But the good news is this. We came together. The Metro Council, mostly Democrats, but it's Democrats and Republicans. They voted unanimously to get rid of no-knock raids. The state legislature did it. A Republican state legislature with Democrats helping passed an expungement law saying that if you behave yourself after 5 years, you can get your rights back and get that excluded so you can get back to work. See, that to me, those things are so common sense that if we say we're a party of family values and we want people to go back to work, well, why not let them get rid of their records so they can actually get a job? There's a lot of good things happening. There are people here in your community who have hired people who have had records. Ultimately, though, the opportunity comes from education, though. One of the things that we've tried, though, is something called opportunity zones, and I'm still hopeful that that's going to help Louisville. If you see the thriving parts of Louisville, some of them in the city come right up against parts of the city that are not thriving. What we've done is said that if you're close to that area and somebody wants to put up a hotel in a non-thriving area, that if they stay there with money for 10 years, they don't pay capital gains tax, which could be an enormous amount of money and an enormous incentive. We haven't gotten that big business to locate yet, but that's what we need to do, is have that creep and from the successful part of Louisville bigger and bigger and creep into the neighborhoods that aren't succeeding as much. I think that could happen. These are called opportunity zones. The bottom line is, and there is some debate on this, but what I don't like seeing, and it bothers me from my perspective, and of course my perspective might not be everybody's perspective, but I don't think there's as much hatred out there as everybody says. Everybody hates each other. I just think there's so much good news and people who actually really don't consider the color of anybody's skin in our communities. I think it's a lot of that good, and it's like on TV, everything's about hate, hate, hate. Everybody hates each other. Sure, there are bad people. Sure, there's still racism in our country. But the thing is, there's also a lot of love in our country. There's a lot of people who don't feel that way. I don't have all the answers. I met some young people who might have some of the answers here today. We'll see if they do. But I do appreciate Pastor Stevenson. I appreciate all of you, what you're trying to do to make Louisville a better place, make Kentucky a better place, and make America a better place. And I hope to be a small part of that. Thank you very much.
With federal agencies, please contact our Bowling Green office or visit our website.